You've arrived at Adventures in Dreamland. Soft, surreal, and slightly cheeky sleep stories with awe and wonder. I'm Serene, your guide tonight. Whether you're here for sleepy science, surreal dreamscapes, or stories that shape who you're becoming, I'm grateful you're here. I write these stories to help you drift and grow. Each night, you're welcomed into a dreamy space from across the world. I'd love to know where you are and what makes your space extra cozy. Running a story cabin in the clouds isn't free. The greatest gift you can give to support my work is sharing our adventures with a friend. Now, we return to what we are. Every living organism on this planet, no matter how small or complex, wants the same thing. Every action we take is for this one thing: to avoid pain and obtain bliss. Bliss is a state of endless joy, mixed with peace beyond our knowing. Whether you call it the soul, awareness, or your highest self, that part of you, during deep sleep, temporarily withdraws from the body and the conscious mind and returns to the freedom and unity with the divine. Bliss without awareness. This restores not just the body and mind, but our spirits too, offering a sense of inner peace and clarity. So yes, sleep is sacred. You are returning back to your natural state. Freedom. Your story begins. Amazing Life of Dolphins is episode 13 and the fourth in our Dream Wonders playlist, where we appreciate life's fascinating facts in our world of wonder. You're already here. The wind is salty, soft, and playful, tousling your hair like a mischievous hand. You're standing at the front of a massive ship, the kind with steel bones and stories in its wake. The sun hangs low and golden, turning the ocean to glass. And just below you, they come. Dolphins, a whole pod of them, carving crescents through the water, leaping, twisting, racing the ship like it owes them money. You blink, trying to catch up. Okay, either I fell asleep watching a cruise documentary, or I've been promoted to honorary sea captain with 0 qualifications. I'm not even wearing shoes. You wiggle your bare toes. The deck is warm and the dolphins are absolutely showing off now. Synchronized jumps, spinning arcs, smooth glides right in front of the bow. The water peels back for them, like it's been waiting all day. And then, you're not on the ship anymore. You're sitting in a tiny wooden dinghy, off to the side, bobbing in gentle swells, watching the same big ship glide past. Your view has shifted. Now you're the one watching the watchers. From here, you can see the dolphins dancing in front of that giant hull, like it's their stage. They know the timing, they hit the rhythm, they leap just before the water peaks. You could swear one of them makes eye contact. The wake from the ship rocks your little boat in slow pulses, the kind that make you sleepy, or thoughtful, or both. And now, the water swallows you whole. No splash, no fear. Just suddenly, you're underneath. The surface ripples above you like sky seen through silk, and ahead, The dolphins rush forward in a V formation. From below, they move like silver arrows, each muscle fluent and precise. The massive hull of the ship cuts the ocean above like a shadow ceiling, and the dolphins ride just ahead of it, surfing a wave you can't see but somehow feel. A pressure, a push. Bow wave, they call it. But you don't need words. You're inside it. One dolphin arcs up and out of view. Another spins mid-glide. The third does something between a shrug and a wiggle, like he's inviting you to follow. You feel weightless, curious, pulled forward not by the boat, but by them, by something deeper. He appears like he's always been there. One sleek turn and he's beside you. The same dolphin who winked at you, yes, winked, a few moments ago during that dreamy bow surfing spectacle. He's close enough now that you notice the soft gray sheen of his skin, the faint stripe that trails from his eye like eyeliner smudged by ocean kisses. His smile isn't a smile, not exactly, but it feels like one. His presence is oddly comforting, like someone you used to know, or maybe always hoped to meet. Name's Ripple, he says without moving his mouth at all. And yes, you can understand me. Don't worry about it. Dream logic. You blink. He loops once, lazily. Oh, and before you ask, no, I don't have a tiny dolphin apartment or wear a tie to work, but I do have a lovely corner of the reef I call home, and I live with 26 of my closest, let's call them roommates, though it's more of a roaming cuddle puddle. You drift beside him, not swimming exactly, just hovering in this clear blue stillness, like the water holds you the same way it holds him. Around you, the ocean breathes. Sunlight spills through in ribbons. Small fish dart past like floating confetti. Ripple continues. You're in warm water, if you're wondering. Somewhere tropical-ish. We dolphins don't exactly hang out near the North Pole. Not unless we take a wrong turn at Greenland. And that did happen once. Trevor still gets teased for it. You smile. He does a small spin. You're lucky, you know. Most humans don't get invited this deep. Not because we're hiding secrets. Okay, maybe some secrets. But mostly because your kind rarely slows down long enough to notice. He pauses. But you noticed. Back on the boat. You looked. You saw. That's why you're here. Okay, so either I'm on a wildlife tour, or I've just been adopted by a very confident dolphin with zero respect for personal space. A few more dolphins appear now, gliding around you like silver kites in slow motion. One is spotted, one is tiny, one has a scar across its fin like a lightning bolt. Ripple gives them a nod as they swirl past. This is part of my pod, he says, quieter now. We travel together, hunt together, nap floating in circles under the moon. It's not perfect, but it's home. A long pause settles in, like the ocean holding its breath. Then Ripple turns to you, ready to find out why we love boats so much? And with that, he flicks his tail, slow, inviting, and begins to lead you forward, deeper into dream and deeper into wonder. You follow Ripple through a slow tunnel of light. The sea seems to part just for you, like it recognizes you're here to listen. Ripple flicks his tail once, gently guiding your gaze forward. What you saw back there, he says, that's called bow riding. And yes, it's as fun as it looks, but there's more to it than showing off. He twirls once, then rises up beside you, swimming just under the shimmering surface. Imagine this. A big ship plows through the ocean. It pushes the water aside, right? That push creates a pressure wave at the front of the boat, a rolling cushion of moving water. Now, if you're shaped like me, and you've got a thing for joyrides, he grins. If a dolphin can grin, you catch that wave like a surfer. Except you don't have to paddle. You don't even have to move your tail. The wave does the work. We just glide. Another dolphin joins from below and rides past in a perfect arc, barely moving a muscle, coasting like a dream. Ripple turns to you again. We bow ride for all sorts of reasons. Sometimes it's energy saving. Sometimes it's curiosity. You humans are a bit of a mystery. And sometimes, honestly, we just like it. He pauses, letting that sit. It's fun. That's it. Sometimes the answer is just joy. Now you're moving faster, not swimming, but gliding forward through the memory of the boat. You see it again. The massive hull, the churning froth at the bow, the slick curve of dolphins darting in and out of that invisible energy wave, like they've rehearsed it for years. Not all dolphins do it, Ripple explains, but many do, especially the fast swimmers, like bottlenose dolphins, spinner dolphins, or us in the Delphinus Delphis crew. A pause. You probably know us as common dolphins, but I don't love that name. It makes us sound basic. A soft chuckle bubbles through the water. You ask, so when did this start? Ripple considers. Always? Maybe forever? Boats make the waves. We ride them. It's like your kids chasing after the ice cream truck. We're not following the boat. We're playing with the physics it leaves behind. He slows now, letting you float beside him. There's something so delicious about borrowing energy from something bigger, letting it lift you, carry you, and you don't have to do anything. You just let it. He hums. And you know what's wild? Sometimes we'll even ride the wake of whales, big ones, blue ones, just for the joy of surfing their passing. You pause, stunned. Ripple floats closer. Now you've seen the wave, felt it. You know what it means to let go. Let the water carry you. He looks up, ready to learn where we go when we're not wave hopping. He turns, and with a single flick of his tail, disappears into the deep blue. Ripple's last words echo in your mind like whale song in deep water. There's something delicious about borrowing energy from something bigger. And for a long moment, you just float there, suspended in the vast blue, gently bobbing on a current that seems to hum with possibility. But then, a thought rises in your mind, half reflection, half curiosity. Wait, what if I tried it? Just like that, the idea takes hold. You glance toward Ripple, who's now gliding in lazy loops ahead. The distant shadow of a ship is returning, its bow plowing forward like a gentle giant through the sea. You feel its wake ripple through your chest. I mean, I'm already here, you think. Might as well learn to dolphin. You reach your arms forward, or at least they feel like arms, even though your body's begun to feel different, sleeker, longer, more fluid than flesh. It's as if your whole self has softened into something made for this world. Not a costume, not a transformation, just a remembering. Your back arches naturally, your chest rises, and when you flick your legs together, no, your tail, it sends a silky jolt of motion through you, like snapping a ribbon underwater. Oh, there it is. Not swimming, not paddling, flowing. The sea doesn't resist you. It welcomes you. You're not fighting the current, you're writing calligraphy inside it. Every motion is elegant, unforced, joyful. Ripple glances over his fin. "Well, look at you," he calls, already moving like one of us. And just then, like he'd planned it, the ship passes overhead. You can feel the pressure wave beneath its bow. It's invisible, but it pulls on something inside you, like gravity, but with personality, like it's calling your name. Ripple smiles. Time to ride. You flick your tail and surge forward, not fast, just right. You catch the edge of the bow wave and it lifts you. No effort, no strain. Just buoyant energy cradling your whole body, like a dream you don't want to wake from. You're riding the bow. The ship becomes your playground. You dip just beneath the surface, rising up in sync with the crests of water it pushes ahead. You twirl once, twice. Another dolphin joins, maybe one of Ripple's cousins, and you leap together, breaching the air like silver commas in a sentence only the sea understands. Then you drop back into the blue, and there's no splash. Just welcome. The water seems to whisper, yes, like that, just like that. You're not watching the boat now. You're watching the way your body glides alongside it, how your whole form becomes tuned to this silent symphony of motion. The hull moves forward, and you move with it. Not to chase, not to catch up, just to be part of it. Ripple swims beside you. It's not about speed, he says, or tricks. It's about letting go. You nod, even though your head doesn't feel quite like a head anymore. It feels like something better, something meant for this. I didn't know I needed this, you think. And then, as if the ocean hears you, your whole body surges upward into the air. You arc alongside the ship, weightless for a moment that feels like a song, then splash back into the blue with a joy that bubbles all around you. You laugh underwater. Yes, laugh. It comes out as a bubbly little chirp. Ripple clicks back, clearly pleased. You're ready, he says. Now that you know what we feel, maybe it's time I told you where we live. He gestures toward a canyon of light beneath the waves. And you follow, still tingling from your first leap. The boat is long gone now, just a distant hum, somewhere above the surface. Down here, the light is softer, bluer. Everything moves like a lullaby. Ripple slows, spinning onto his back as if to float. Fins relaxed, the tip of his tail gently swaying with the tide. This is the best part, he says, eyes half-lidded. No waves to chase, just us. You realize you're not alone with him anymore. The whole pod has gathered. Shimmering shapes gliding in loops and figure eights. One of them releasing a curious bubble ring that floats upward like a jellyfish. They say humans like facts, Ripple says. So here's a comfy little info nap, just for you. He twirls in the water. There are over 40 different species of dolphins, if you can believe it. And no, we don't all look like me. Some of my cousins are pink. Some have spots, and a few look suspiciously like small whales. But we're all family. One of the younger dolphins squeaks and zips past you, trailing a spiral of bubbles. Ripple chuckles. That's Zuzu. She has no chill. You glide beside him, mirroring his movement. It feels good, effortless, like you've been doing it your whole life. We live almost everywhere, Ripple goes on. Warm tropical seas, chilly coastal shallows, even rivers. Some of us like solitude, but most of us like me, live in pods, which is basically dolphin for family/party. A pod member passes close and gently bumps you. Like a nudge, you bump back. Some of us live 20 years, some twice that. My great-grand dolphin made it to 57. Absolute legend. You tilt slightly to the side, letting the sunlight filter down through the rippling ceiling of the sea. It dances across Ripple's back, catching on a few old scratches and healed lines. Each pod has its own culture, he says. We pass down calls, tricks, even favorite hangout spots. It's like generational knowledge, dolphin traditions. Some folks call that intelligence. I call it love with a memory. Another podmate clicks and squeals beside you, and Ripple grins. Oh, they want to show you the nap rock. It's perfectly warmed by a crack in the seafloor. You're officially invited. You swim in a loose spiral, heart full, body weightless. There's still so much more to learn. But here, with the pod drifting lazily through sun-dappled blue, you could stay forever. Ripple guides you with a flick of his tail, weaving slowly through the pod. All right, he says, glancing back with a grin. Time to see the digs. Welcome to our not-so-humble abode. You pass beneath a curtain of swaying kelp that parts like stage curtains, revealing what feels like an entire underwater village. Not in the human sense. There are no walls, no roofs, no corners, just open space shaped by coral arches, sea fans, and glowing patches of soft sand, where dolphins lounge like sunbathers at a floating spa. A pair of older dolphins click and chatter as they glide past, nodding their beaks in greeting. Ripple whispers, "That's Tico and Bree. They've been together longer than some sea turtles stay awake. Absolute pod royalty." You follow Ripple through a narrow canyon where the sunlight filters in long golden ribbons. He points with his fin to a small cove with smooth stones arranged in a crescent. That's where the kids play echolocation tag. They're terrible at it, which is what makes it great. Nearby, a podmate floats lazily upside down, using slow tail beats to stay in place. Ripple waves a fin. That's Mello. He once slept through a shark alarm. He says it's because his dreams were louder. You pass a small rise of polished rock, glimmering with mineral crystals that look like spilled moonlight. Ripple circles it reverently. This is one of our resting stones. We don't sleep all the way like you. One side of our brain stays awake, but here, we take turns drifting, half aware, half dreaming. You pause at the top of a seagrass knoll. Tiny fish dart beneath you like flickering thoughts. Ripple looks around and hums a soft click. We don't really do bedrooms, you know. The whole ocean is home, but everyone has their favorite currents, their familiar coral caves. It's less about where and more about who. Home is the sound of your pod sleeping beside you. You feel something deep and calm settle into your chest, like the sea has pulled a soft blanket over you. Ripple nudges you gently. Some humans build fences. We build memories. You both hover there for a moment, watching another dolphin curl into a lazy spiral, settling over a patch of warm sand. The ocean around you quiets, as if in respect. And for just a moment, this place, this gentle, pulsing world beneath the waves, feels more familiar than your own. Ripple lets out a happy click. All right, time to talk snacks. You swim alongside him through a meadow of swaying seagrass, the currents rippling like green silk. A few silverfish dart ahead of you, fast, jittery, glittery. Ripple hums thoughtfully. Some folks think we eat whatever swims by, but it's not that simple. We're picky, sophisticated, refined. We're basically the underwater version of someone who only eats the fries at the bottom of the bag because they're crispier. You watch as a dolphin in the distance performs a perfect circle around a school of fish. With a swift flick, the pod corrals them, like dancers in a silent ballet. Then, with one coordinated movement, the dolphins swoop in, each catching a fish mid-swim. Group hunting, Ripple explains. We've got strategies, tricks. My cousin once faked a sneeze to startle a crab out of hiding. True story. You laugh, the bubbles rising past your cheeks. Ripple gestures toward the sand below. Some of us like to chase fish into the shallows and beach ourselves just a little to snatch them up. Don't worry, we know how to wiggle back in. It's called strand feeding. Fancy, huh? He twirls once. And then there's echolocation. Our sonar game, top tier. We can see fish with sound, like living submarines, but way cuter. You wonder what it would be like to sense the world that way, to hear emotion in shape and light. What would your voice look like underwater? As you glide deeper, the water around you darkens to a deeper blue, almost violet. Strange, dazzling shapes move in the distance. A jellyfish drifting like a lampshade, a school of bioluminescent squid blinking Morse code into the deep. The ocean's full of weirdos, Ripple says fondly. We like it that way. Giant clams, yawning vents, shrimp that punch like boxers. It's not just about food, it's about discovery. Every meal's a scavenger hunt. You pause near a rocky reef, watching a stingray blanket itself in sand like a sleepy tortilla. Ripple nudges you. And hey, we don't just eat fish. Some dolphins nibble on squid, octopus, even crustaceans. It's a whole buffet down here. I once tried a jellyfish on a dare. Never again. He shudders theatrically. The ocean opens wider, vast and humming. You humans always talk about how mysterious space is, Ripple says softly, but most of your planet is right here. Still unexplored, still whispering secrets. You float in silence for a moment, surrounded by glimmering movement, shadows, and light bending with the tide. Every direction feels endless, and yet strangely safe. Ripple taps your fin. Now that you've dined with us, it's time to see where we go when the day's done. Our special spots. His smile grows wide. Ready to meet the sea's best hideaways? Ripple dips his head, a gleam in his eye. Okay, now, I'm really going to show off. He kicks into a spin, leading you down a narrow passage lined with coral towers that look like dripping candle wax. The water grows warmer here, the light more golden than blue. Fish peek out from coral alcoves, and a shy octopus squeezes through a keyhole-sized crevice, tossing sand behind it like a grumpy roommate. You hear a low humming ahead, not mechanical, but musical, a gentle rhythm, like the softest wind chimes echoing through water. This, Ripple whispers, is where we go when we're off the clock. You drift into a wide underwater clearing, a dome of reef ringed in anemones and soft waving fans. Dozens of dolphins are already here, floating lazily, some nuzzling, others sleeping with one eye open. Quite literally, half a dolphin brain stays awake when we rest, Ripple explains. It's how we breathe and stay alert. So, yeah, no such thing as total sleep for us. Kind of like new parents. You both hover near a smooth, hollowed-out rock basin where two young dolphins are playing with a long strand of kelp. They toss it back and forth like a balloon, giggling in chirps and clicks. "We love games," Ripple says, passing things around, racing bubbles, surfing waves. Once, I saw a dolphin use a pufferfish like a beach ball. That one ended with a lot of sneezing. He gestures to a pair of dolphins leaping silently just above the reef. "See that? That's joy. We do that just because we can. Sometimes we even give each other names. Signature whistles. That's how we call our friends, our families. There's something different here. Not just play, but warmth, familiarity, love." In fact, dolphins are among the few animals in the world who can recognize themselves in a mirror. They know their own reflections, a sign of self-awareness once thought to be uniquely human. We understand body language, we form bonds, and we even help each other when sick or injured. Dolphins are wildly intelligent and wildly empathetic too. Ripple clicks proudly at this part. "People think we're always moving," Ripple adds, "but we have our spots. Favorite rocks, favorite routes, little meeting places under the sea. Some of us even return to the same bays every season, year after year." He turns, then slowly spins upside down until his belly faces the water's surface. He stays there, still, as if he's listening. You do the same. Silence and soft light. It's a kind of peace you didn't know existed, like resting inside a song you've always loved but never heard played underwater. "Every pod has its rhythm," Ripple murmurs, "its ways, its traditions. But we all know this. To be together is to belong. And to play? That's how we remember we're alive." He gives you a gentle nudge. "One last stop," he says, "before you drift off entirely." Ripple floats beside you now, calm and unhurried. There's no performance, no tour guide tone. Just the quiet ease of being with someone who sees the world a little differently. "We've seen you, he says. "Humans. We've watched you from the waves, listened to your boats, felt your stories ripple through the water." He turns in a slow circle, letting bubbles rise from his blowhole like punctuation. "You rush so much, as if meaning lives only in motion. But we know something different, something simpler." He glances over, a smile in his eyes. "You know how the ocean pulls at your ankles when you're standing still? That's not a warning. That's a reminder." He pauses, letting that land. A reminder that connection happens in stillness, in listening, in feeling each other's currents. We don't talk over each other. We echo. We play. We leave space. He rolls onto his back, watching the surface above. "You ask us why we jump in front of boats, why we ride the waves you make." He grins. "Because it feels good. Because it's fun. Because it reminds us that life isn't always about survival. Sometimes it's about joy." His voice softens. "And sometimes it's about choosing who you swim beside, not out of fear or duty, but because their presence makes you feel more like yourself." You drift in place, weightless. The water hugs you from every side. A pod glides past, slow and close. Not a parade, not a show, but a family simply passing through. Ripple closes his eyes for a moment. There's music in the ocean, and not just in the songs we sing. There's music in how we move, how we rest, how we care. He opens one eye, and if you ever forget who you are, come find us again. Swim with us. Play with us. You'll remember. Ripple swims beside you once more. Though his movements have slowed, he no longer zips or twirls. He just glides, a companion in stillness. The ocean feels warmer now, somehow, or maybe it's you. Your body has grown so used to the water, to the feeling of being suspended, supported, softly cradled by something vast and alive. Ripple hums, not a song exactly, but a tone, a vibration that seems to come from his chest, his skin, the space around him. It matches the quiet beat of your heart. Some say dreams are where we go to forget, he murmurs. But I think they're where we come to remember. He circles you once, gently, as if drawing a soft boundary in the water. Not a wall, but a welcome. You don't have to do anything now, he adds. Not swim, not speak, just float. And so you do. You let go. Your body becomes water. Your thoughts scatter like bubbles. You're no longer sure where you end and the sea begins. Ripple speaks once more, but not in words. It's more like a feeling, a soft echo inside your chest. You are loved. You are home. And as that warmth holds you, something begins to shift. The water beneath you becomes thicker, denser, firmer. A surface appears where there was none. You're not falling. You're arriving. Your back meets cotton, a sheet, a mattress. Is that the hum of the sea still in your ears? Or the soft spin of your ceiling fan? One more dolphin. Goodbye from ripple echoes. You blink, or maybe you don't. The ocean fades, but its rhythm remains. Ripple is gone. Or maybe he's still swimming, far below, far within, but his message lingers. One thing is certain. You're safe. You are home. Sweet dreams.